Well, welcome to lecture number 5 for those that are watching online, and we are about to start chapter 4 of the Mesilat Yesharim. The Hebrew title is Bederech Kiniyat HaZihirut, or How to Acquire Vigilance or Watchfulness, or whatever your favorite English translation translates Zihirut, meaning which means the midah, the character trait and quality of um, being careful about your life, how you live, etc. So the first two chapters, he described to us what Zahirut is. And now he's going to describe, and this is how we'll do all the character traits. He's going to describe how you acquire this trait. Like, what's the path? How you go? You want to become a person who exhibits and lives this way. So how do you do it? So this is a pretty long one. It's also very interesting, but it's all hopefully the whole book will be interesting. And so I hope we finish it tonight, but if not, we'll see. So hine, uh, behold is the way that's usually translated, but just calls your attention. Mashe maybe et adam al derech klal el azihira. That which, in general, that which brings a person to acquire this trait of zihirut, of watchfulness, carefulness, vigilance, um, is what is who limud haTorah, is studying the Torah. Now, the interesting thing about this is I just came back from army training, and one of the things we had learned is how to do risk assessments, right? So before you have to do a mission, you have to do a risk assessment. And you have to do a lot of assessments, but one of them is the risk assessment. You also have to, you try to figure out like what your obstacles are, right? What does your enemy have in his arsenal, right? What are you like? What's the terrain like? What's the weather like? And then you have to do an analysis of the situation in order to design a mission with the best possible chance of success. And you have to do a risk analysis, right? And which takes a lot of study and work, right? You can't just go run into the battlefield and just start shooting around, right? You're going to mess up. You're not going to be successful, and you're probably going to have a lot more losses that you didn't want. And over here, I see what he's saying, what he's starting to say now, and what we're going to read in the next paragraph or two is really brought this to mind, because the bottom line is we want to acquire zihirut. We want to be careful and live a careful life, right? So I'm sorry, I just keep getting calls. I apologize, but but um but um but we how do you be careful, right? So you have to study. You need to learn. You need to know the situation, right. So knowledge is the way to be careful. If you have no idea where you're going, then you can't be prepared, right? I go hiking a lot of times. So I want to know, how long is the trail? Is there places to get water? Is it a lot of climbing? Do I need to have the right shoes? Is it going to rain? Do I need to have a coat for the rain? So gathering knowledge is the primary, and as he says, al derech klal, in general, that's all you really need to know. He just told us in the first sentence, basically, if you want to acquire you need to acquire knowledge in order to be able to be careful. It sounds so basic, but when we think back in our lives to how many times we've entered situations without enough preparation, like we're almost always, you set yourself up to fail unless you somehow get lucky. But otherwise, it's just that. So if we want to know how to live a life careful, we need to learn Torah. The Torah is going to give us guidance on how we're supposed to live our lives. We're not supposed to do things that we're not supposed to do, and we're supposed to do things we are supposed to do, etc. Rabbi Pinchas with and this is what, remember, he's based his book on the Braita, which was the saying of Rabbi Pinchas, that you study Torah and it leads to vigilance, which leads to it leads to Zerizut, right, and so on and so forth, until you reach the highest levels of holiness. But it all starts with study, right? It starts with studying Torah, right? So that's the bottom line. However, however, if we want to go into more details, and now we have a lot of pages, okay, right? So let's go into a little bit more detail. So hamevi lazehu, So now, so number one, it's not just study, but it's more than that. It's hisbonenut. You have to think al chomer avoda, on the seriousness of the job, of the work, right? Asher chayav b'hadam, that a person is tasked to do omek hadin aleh, on the depth of the judgment that will be placed upon it. And what that means is, right, and the consequences of not being prepared, right? So thinking of it, we need to remember, right, how difficult the task is, how important the task is, and what the consequences are if we fail, right? So we need to think about that a little bit, and or a lot of it, right, in order to you know, v'yetze lozeh. And how do you know that? How do you find out, like, how important the job is, how difficult the job is, right? It's min ha'iyun b'ma'asim haksuvim b'sifrei hakodesh, by analyzing and studying and considering the actions that are written in the holy books, right? Right, that guide us as to what's important and what's not. And I want to take out of this. Obviously, his focus is on living a holy life in the Jewish sense, living it based on the Torah. But this it's no less important to understand, you know, with any task that we do, understand the importance of the task and what the consequences are if we fail, right? And what the benefit would be if we're successful at it. So, and also studying the sayings and the teachings of the rabbis, of the great sages who have taught us and tried to call our attention to this. So within this thought process, right? This thinking, this contemplation, right? There are ha'arot b'hadraga. There's different types, different levels, right, of knowledge, right? And there's three levels he's going to divide it into, and these three levels are pretty fascinating. And if and there's a lot more packed into them than meets the eye when you first read it. And I'm going to try to tease out, you know, what I've seen from them. And it reminds me a lot of, and I mentioned, I think, in our first class of this article that I read, showing how even though the Mesilat Yesharim is very much a mystic, but a lot of it's a very rationalistic type of mysticism. And a lot of it does dovetail a lot with Maimonidean thought, which is something that's I personally am very into, the thought of Maimonides and the Rambam. But we're going to see in these three levels something very similar, something in the Rambam we're very used to seeing. And the Rambam very often talks to the ideal reason to learn and know the truth, and then what happens to the general public, right? Which needs a different way, a different motivation to act right and live a correct life. So, like, the simple folk don't quite get to the highest level, and then there's people in the middle, right? So he's going to lay out three classes: l'shleme hadat, which it translates to those of complete knowledge. My English translation, those of perfect knowledge, the first level. I don't know if you guys have different translations. I'm curious to know what Kaplan says. But you see it. The second one is la prusim mehem, the ones that are not perfect in knowledge but still have some, right? Ulochol ha'amon kulo, and to everyone, right? So there's three people. There's three groups: the people that are of perfect knowledge, the people that are not quite perfect knowledge, and then the people, you know, the in betweens, and then there's everybody else, the vast majority of people. So l'shlemi hadat, to those that are of perfect knowledge, right? In other words, these are the people that truly understand the value, right, of the task at hand, because because knowledge itself, right, and das itself, his bonus, thinking about it, its contemplation itself, is inherently valuable to them, right? You don't need to explain to them a reason why it's valuable. It's valuable because it is, right? That's the highest level. So them tiyelahem ha'he'ara, right? They will be awakened to live a life of zehirut, right? They will be awakened to this character trait of vigilance, which we're trying to inculcate in ourselves. V'mashi yisbar lam ki rak hashleimus, who it is perfection, right? It is clear to them that it is perfection is the only thing that is the adavar haroi she'ech hamed me'am lo zu aseh. It is perfection that is desirous, is their desire to achieve, right? And nothing else, right? They want perfection because they want it to be perfect, right? They want to do it right. They want to live right because they understand that being right is important, right? Right? In and of itself. V'she'ein ra gadol, there's nothing worse mechason hashleimus, to not be perfect, to do things the wrong way, or to do them incompletely, or to read half the book and not read the other half, right? Or understand science but only do the first 5 classes but not the last 5, right? And staying away from lack of completeness. Once this is clear to them, Heyos ha'emtsoim elav ha'ma'asim ha'tovim amidot ha'tovot, right? And it becomes to them, similarly, it is clear to them the means, right, to achieve that, which is to live a proper life, to do the good actions and to have good character traits. Vadahu shelo yisratzu me'olam lahamit ba'elahem samalak me'am. It is certain that they will never want to do anything less, right, than perfection, all right, or to lighten up their load upon them. So basically, he really on the surface level, it almost looks like he didn't even answer the question. To them, it's important because it's important, right? It's a little bit circular, but that's the point that he's trying to make. You don't need a reason why, right? This reminds me very much of the Rambam's idea that truth is important because it's true. You don't need to, right? It's just that is important, right? So we should try to achieve and know that and live that because it is, right? So, and the people that are of perfect knowledge, that's the class of people that I don't need to explain to them why you have to be good. It's just good because it is. So it's already clear to them, right? That if they're missing some of these means, in other words, the good deeds that they would live, or if they do them, these means, meaning these actions, these good actions, but they do them in a weak way and not complete way, and not with their entire strength and not with their entire enthusiasm, that is necessary, they'll never reach the true shleimus, the true completion. They'll never get there. To the extent that they didn't try hard enough, they will be missing something at the end, right? It's like I'm climbing Mount Everest, but I only got halfway there because I only did half of the thing. So all they did, so they can go around and brag, I got halfway up Mount Everest. All right, that's better than I've done, but it's not much to go home and brag about, right? Right. So it turns out that they live a life that's missing this completeness. Mashuhulahem, to these people, that is a Torah Gadol of a Rabbah. That's a great evil and it's a terrible pain, right? Because this class of people are the few and far between who want this perfection simply because it is. Al-Kain, therefore, lo yivcharu ela laharbos mehem ulachmer b'chol. What they will choose to do, the only thing they will choose to do, is to do as much as possible the things that are necessary to be successful, and to be careful in all of the specifics, the details, to make sure they get every detail right. V'lo yanucho, they will not rest. V'lo yishketu, and they won't be quiet. Midaga, from having this concern, this worry. Midavar, from anything. Penyachsar me'am, because they're always going to be concerned that maybe they're going to be missing something. Mashiagia osam asashlem, is something which could bring them to this wholeness, this completeness, asheram chavezim, which they desire to have. I mean, it sounds a little bit like OCD.
Yeah. I was like, type A.
That's exactly right.
But so it clearly does sound like that, and certainly you can understand it that way. And some people, people that are OCD will read this and they'll make their condition worse. But I don't think that's what he means at all. I think I'm really want to zero more on the aspect of and you'll see when we contrast with the next two groups, right? Why I'm emphasizing this, and that is that what matters is is that they're doing this because they understand and appreciate the importance of doing it right, right? And that's not necessarily OCD. They realize that doing life right is important, right? They understand, and I don't have to do it because of any other motivation, right? And those people with that highest motivation are also going to do it the best. Because if they have any other motivation in mind, like let's say you're doing it because you want to people to praise you on, you want to get 100,000 likes on Instagram, or you do it because you want to, you want to make a lot of money, or because you're afraid God's going to zap you with lightning if you don't, right? Whatever all those motivations, right? You may end up doing at least technically the same action, right? Mm-hmm. You might, it depends the situation, but it won't be perfect. It won't be done right. It won't be done well. It won't be, but because these people truly understand the value of what they're doing, they're going to do it right. Mm-hmm. Right. And that's the point that he's making. So, and then this is what King Solomon says in Mishlei and Proverbs. And this is interesting because this verse in Proverbs, Ashrei Adam Mefachei Tamid, praiseworthy is the person who's always afraid, right? Now that this is totally like OCD, right? I mean, that's what it sounds like. So I think the point what he's doing here is he's telling us, he's trying to explain to us that that's not the point. Mefachei Tamid means you always care to do it the right way, and that's not really OCD, right? It's important, right? Because it's important. A person that's OCD is going to do things that aren't important, right? But doing your job right, whatever that job is important. So you do it right. What does it mean, mefachei tamid, that you're always afraid? It's referring to the words of the Torah, that teaches us how to live, as opposed to always afraid, meaning you're walking down the street and you're watching every little thing, or you have to brush everything really clean, or whatever it is that OCD people do. So anyway, so this is the highest level, but we're not finished with the highest level. So Vahine, and you should know that Sof Zosa Madrega, the end of this level, in other words, the highest level of the people that realize this, who Nikr Yiraschet. This is the great character trait called fear of sin, right? And chet, literally the word chet, which is usually translated as a sin, right? It actually means it's something missing, right? Right? If it's something is missing, it's not complete, it's not whole, right? It's the Hebrew word. So Yiraschet means being afraid of missing the mark, of not doing it perfect. Shehimin hameshubachos hamadregos. That level of always being afraid of not doing it completely right, of missing the mark, right? It is also the chato means like if you shoot an arrow and you miss the mark, that's also called a chet. It's also missing the mark, right? That is the greatest, the most praiseworthy of all the levels. Person should always be concerned and worried that penny matzebi, maybe there will be something in his personality, is a shemetz chet, some remnant of missing something, of sin, sheyakveo min hashleimus, will keep him away from completeness, asher hu chayav l'shtalu bavuro, that it's his job to constantly try to achieve that level of perfection. There's another statement. This is actually in the Gemara in Bava Batra, where it's talking there about the future times. Everybody's imagining the time when God is rewarding all the righteous, and it says there that He's going to take the Leviathan, the Leviathan, and make canopies like gazebos every righteous person is going to have their own gazebo to sit in. So it's going to be nice with shade and flowers, probably, and a nice breeze. What could be better than that? So everyone's going to have one. But depending on how great you are, you'll have either a really nice one or you'll have a little cheap one, right? So
Cardboard box.
Right. But the real status symbols, at least you got to get a gazebo or something. But anyway, so it says, and the Gemara says a very curious statement. It's kind of, I think it's Rabbi Chanina says, and that people people are going to be embarrassed and they're going to burn. Literally, nechve means to be singed by fire. they're going to be because of the friend. The other guy has a bigger, nicer one than they do, right? So what does it mean? What does this mean? That in the future they're going to have this reward, and then they're going to be jealous of the other guy has a better gazebo than me. So he's saying that this is not referring to jealousy like traditional standard jealousy. We're talking, remember, about the righteous people that are being rewarded. We're not talking about the idiots, right? If we're talking about idiots, then fine. It's jealousy that motivates them. But that people that lack real knowledge, when they learn this Gemara, they think that everyone's going to be jealous of everyone else. No, that's not what it means. Like I'm going to write about the next category of people that are motivated by such things like jealousy, right? But I'm going to write that in a minute. But let's not get there. Ella, I'm talking about the people that are not motivated. That also atzmo chaser min hashleimus madrega, because when he sees the other guy with the bigger thing, he realizes, I could have been better, right? I didn't do it all the way, right? And they'll be upset because when they look back at their life and they're like, yes, I accomplished a lot, but I could have accomplished much more. If I didn't make this mistake, if I corrected this, if I fixed that, I could have done better. So that he could have achieved like the other one. It's not that I'm jealous of him. It's just when I see those other examples, I realize how much higher I could have gotten. Through thinking like this, a person who is so complete in his knowledge, right, will definitely not fail to be careful in the actions that he does. So that's class number one. That's the first group. And this is the group of people that do it simply because they recognize and understand the importance of the job that's ahead of them. However, there's the next level, right? And I'm going to point out as we read this that he's not saying that there is no place for the next level of motivation. There is a place for it. It's just not as high and not as good as the first group that we just discussed. But sometimes we can relate to these other groups. So to those that are slightly lower than that or less than that, in other words, people that don't fully grasp the importance of the task at hand. So the motivation that, according to them, right, and their motivation will be commensurate with their understanding. That would be the honor that they desire, right? Right. It's interesting how the first motivation and the main motivation, the only motivation discusses in this group is the motivation for honor, which its corollary, of course, the other side is jealousy of others, right? And it's interesting because you could have thought there's a lot of motivations that we have, right? There's motivations for pleasure, motivations for for laziness or whatever. A lot of things that we have that motivate us, but really probably the biggest motivator and probably the most damage that humans have done were humans that are motivated primarily by the desire for honor, right? But he said, because it is, however, he's going to show now how this motivation for honor can also be an incentive to use for good purposes, right? Because anyone who is a baldat, which means anyone who is religious. So he's throwing out, if you're not religious and you don't care about God and you don't care about living a Torah observant life, fine, you can use the motivation for honor to do all kinds of things, right? But if you're a baldat, right, it's clear to you that in the world of truth, in the real world, right, the world of truth, you can also translate this in the world to come, which is the world, or the way I translate it, the world that is coming, the world of the future, the world that we're building towards, right? The levels aren't, how do you grade who gets the most honor? Does it go by Instagram likes, right, or followers, right? Or is there something else? A religious person knows that it's judged based on your actions, right? Do you do a lot of mitzvot? Do you live right? Do you give charity? Do you treat people nicely? Do you keep the Torah properly? Do you, or do you do the opposite? So that people know that, right? So and that they're in this world of truth, in the world that's of the future, right? The one who's uplifted, who's the one that's put up on a pedestal, who's the one that sits in the corner office, right? It's it's the person who lived a better life, who did better things, right? And the one who hardly did anything and hardly achieved anything in his life, he's going to be in the mailroom in the basement, right? So in Cain, I don't know, they don't have those anymore, probably. Mail rooms, I don't know. But whatever. But anyway, in Canaan, so therefore, such a person that realizes that how could such a person, right, just ignore his actions if he knows that in order to be honored, he has to do good? So then he has to do good. He can't ignore it. So because later on, he's not going to have the chance to fix it once it's gone. Once the future is here, you can't change what you did in the past, right? Once you messed up before, you can't make it anymore like you never messed up before. So this is a next level. These are the people who they understand what's important, right? The reason why these are on a higher level than the next group, which we still have a bit to read before we get to them, is that they do understand that this is important, right? But they still have an ulterior motivation, right? It's not completely for its own sake, right? They're not going to seek the truth just because it's true. They're not going to do, keep, a Shabbat or give a charity just because it's the right thing to do. They want to give the charity, but they also want to see the headline, right, that says, Joe Schmo gave a big donation, right? And they want to do it because, they know that in the world of meaning, the world of truth, the world of the future, that's a world in which they're going to be judged based on their actions. Yeah, go ahead.
So would this be someone who, but honored, you mean like public recognition?
It could be, these people have the desire for public recognition, but they also have in their mind that we realize they do understand that public recognition in the world today, the world that's before us, is not really meaningful. But what's meaningful is the honor that they're going to get down the road, right? Okay. So, but of course, it's not like there's a brick wall between group A and group. There's a gradation, right? Mm-hmm. Like I know that it's more important to be honored in the world of meaning, however you envision the world of the future, right? But it's more important to know that when push comes to shove, at the end of the story, that I can look back in my life and know that I did the right thing, and that's an honor that is more important. But I still care, it still feels nice when somebody writes me a good review, and it's. So there are fools, right? And they figure they just want the easiest thing. They want the lightest possible burden. They don't want to do the work, right? So they figure, they'll say as follows: why should we bother ourselves with all of this piety, this chasidut, the priesthood, and separating ourselves from this world and all this stuff, right? Why should I work hard on being better, right? I'll take the easy route. I just don't want God to send me to hell, right? I don't want to be the people that are going to end up in the dumps. So I'll do it, but I'll do it half-baked, right? I'm just not interested in doing the work, right? I don't have to I don't need the biggest gazebo in the future, right? I don't need to go all the way to heaven as long as I don't land in hell, right? I don't need the inner chambers, the corner office. As long as I can walk into the corporate building, so it's fine. I'll be in the mailroom. That's also okay, right? It's mediocrity that he's about to speak against. It's the acceptance of mediocrity. But is that okay? Like a mediocre person, according to this thought process, isn't bad. They're just not as good as the other guy, right? So so we don't have the big portion. We'll have a little portion. I'll get a cheaper, paycheck, but I'll still be okay. It's enough for us. I don't want to have such a heavy burden just in order to get higher up. So, but the thing is, I'm going to ask them one question, right? Right? Al nikalel isbol ba'olam hazeh, right? Is it hacholef lirot echad mechavreim mechubadim nusayot zermeim moshalem. Is it easy for them to see when somebody else, right, who let in this world he's focusing on now? He said olam hazeh, in this world, not the world of the future. Today, right now, does it bother you that that jerk is sitting in the corner office and bossing you around, right? He's telling you, right? He's ruling over you, and he's the one that's his name is on the stationery, right? Does it bother you? So, and the answer is inevitably going to be yes. Yeah, it does bother me that someone else achieved. So that means there's something inside you that wants to do better, or wants to be better, right? Right. So kol echad, a kol shekin, certainly echad me'avdehem, right? One of their what if one of the people who's below you now, one of your servants, right? You know, or that homeless guy who you look at as a guy who's uh, uh, despicable or lowly, or or that dirty guy in the street, you think of yourself as better off. What if tomorrow he's your boss, right? Does that hurt you, right? So won't you get your blood boil? Lo, certainly, right? So in other words, what I think he's saying here is just that you claim to not really care, right? But you really do care, right? You claim you're making it up as an excuse for your laziness, but it's not true that you don't want better than that for yourself. You do want better than that for yourself, right? So we see kol amal adam linasel kol mishuchal. Everyone, this is what people work their whole lives, because everyone wants to be better, right? We're constantly trying to climb higher up in the rungs of society. So I want to be among the bigger guys, and then when I get there, I want to be among the bigger guys, and so on and so forth. He cannot ishmael. This is what jealousy is between people. It's just a natural state. Remember, he's not talking about the ideal group. The ideal group of people is the first group, right? Right, but he is saying though that the next group are people that understand that they do want to be better, but jealousy and desire for honor is a significant motivating factor. And if the other guy gets high up and you're still down, right? Certainly that which you're gonna suffer through is only that which you're forced to, because you're not going to be able to hold it back. And your heart is going to be crushed within your soul, because you're going to always you're just going to be crushed. When you see the other people surpass you, it's kind of like, imagine if you go to class to be a lawyer, right? And you all sit down on the first day of law school. Everybody is all ready to roll, and everybody is is all gung ho, and everybody knows that the top 10% of the class are going to get jobs with the big firms, and they'll go on to everything. The rest, they'll do malpractice lawsuits, right? So I hope I didn't just insult anybody. It'll be right. So just imagine if you started off by saying, right, all I want to do is just be a lawyer, right? As long as I can hang up a shingle outside and I can get a paycheck, do a few cases, whatever, that's fine with me. That's not really true, right? You may do that, but won't you be upset when you realize that when those other guys were studying hard and you were in the bar with your friends partying and saying, so I know enough to pass, but those other guys got 10 points more because they worked, right? And then 10, 20 years later, that other guy is sitting in the Supreme Court as a justice, and you, I'm not sure how much of a compliment that is anymore, but you are still chasing ambulances, right? So you realize that you wanted to do a better job, that you wanted to do more, and you knew you could have. It's like you made the choice to not do it. It's one thing if you tried your best, and this is where you can get up to, then you're fine. But if you otherwise, so therefore, if this is true when we're talking about that it's so hard for people to be low down when on levels of social stratification that are meaningless, right? The things that we see around us, whether you're in the corner office in the mailroom, those are meaningless stratifications, but people still care so much. Because we know, I'm using this as an example to demonstrate a point he's saying, but I know, of course, that the stratifying the guy in the mailroom as below the guy in the corner office and the top floor is that's just because of the way it looks. The fact that one guy's the boss and the other one's subordinate, that's all falsehood. The guy on top might be a bigger idiot than the guy on the bottom. He might be less productive. He might be less on other more important scales. But we do understand from this that we want more, that you won't be satisfied if you don't. So if that's true with things that mean nothing, how is it possible for you to handle when you see that you are lower than other people, right? Right? That now you are lower than them. And now I'm talking about in a place where the mala, the levels, all right, is truthful, is real, and the value is the value of eternity, right? You might not see it today, right? You might that guy who's in the mailroom might be doing things and living a life that's really, really special, and the guy upstairs might be living a life that's anything but, right? And you might not see that today because the one guy's wearing a fancy suit and flying his private plane, and the other guy, is living in a basement somewhere. But in the world of meaning, the world to come, we may find out that the tables are totally flipped, right? The SRCO, right? Now we might not see its value. So therefore, therefore we may not consider it, right, or feel it. But in its time, the time will come when it will be clear, and the truth will be clear, and it will be clear to your own pain and your own embarrassment and shame, because you could have lived that life and you didn't live that life because you decided to be mediocre. Certainly you're going to have a lot of pain from that, because one day you'll look back. And I know that one easy way of understanding this, and the terminology that he uses a lot, is understanding the world to come, right, as a world in which everyone that lived righteous is rewarded and everyone that lived not righteous is punished, right? And that's an easy way to understand it. It's a construct, though. I don't think it's fine if you believe it that way and you want to see it that way. That's fine. But to me, it's like, in the real world, the world of truth, which I think we all live through every day, right? Today is a future in a sense, because it's a future to my yesterday, right? And yesterday, the way I lived and the choices that I made, right, have an effect on where I am now, right? And now I realize that which I did yesterday was either dumb or stupid or lazy or great, because now I'm getting the fruit of the effort that I put in yesterday. So when the day comes that true value means something, that's when you'll realize that, oh, why didn't I work harder before? And he uses the construct of people on different social levels in order to demonstrate that we really all want to do it right? Because the day will come when we'll regret not having done it right. So, so therefore you can see that this savlanut, this tolerance, right? No, those people, they almost come off as saying, oh, I'm not going to be pushing hard and working hard. I'm okay. They make it like it's like an acceptance, like it's a positive thing, right? Like, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with being down here where I am, right? So you see, Yesharim dorshim latzmam lakel me'em chomer ha'avoda. It's really not a tolerance. It's really just they're doing it because they don't want to work hard, right? And we all find this among ourselves, unfortunately, sometimes. We'd rather not do the good work. It's kind of like sour grapes. It's so hard to try to get all the way up to those grapes. So you just tell yourself, I don't really want to do it. And then you don't do the work, right? It's just a lie. It's a deceptive lie that that their desire, their yetzer, their evil inclination, right, or in this case, the desire for laziness, right, is convincing them that they don't want to reach higher. Below davar amiti kal, it's not the truth. The truth is not that they don't want to reach higher. The truth is that they're just being lazy, right? Had they seen the truth, if they really understood the truth, right? Now remember, what's the truth? The truth is the first group, right? The truth is that it's important because it's important, right? So they do want better, right? And if they only could have seen the truth, right? Also, they're not searching, they're not striving for the truth. So they continue to go and they make a mistake, a willing mistake. This seductive deception that they think that it's okay to be mediocre lasts until it won't help them anymore, until there's no hope anymore, until it's too late. Because there will be a time in all of our lives when it will be too late, right, to fix all the things that we didn't do, all the things that we could have achieved, right? They will no longer have in their capabilities the ability to fix the things that they ruin. And this is what King Solomon said. And he says, "Kol asher timtzah yodcha la'asos." This is from Kohelet, from Ecclesiastes. Everything that you can do, b'kochacha, that you're able to do, I say, do it. If you have the ability and you have the capability, you have, let's say, the physical strength, the emotional strength, you have the financial ability, or just the circumstances lead you, and you're in a situation where you have the skill to do it, right? Right? Ki ein ma'aseh v'cheshbon v'das. Because there is no actions, there is no more thinking, there is no more wisdom, there is no more chachma, which is skills, in the depth of the sheol, of the grave, which is where you're heading, right? All of those four things, maaseh, cheshbon, das, chachma, right? Those things that people need, right? The ability, maaseh is the ability to act, the physical strength to do things. Cheshbon is the mental acuity to understand, things. Das is just general knowledge, and chachma is usually refers to skill, physical skill, right? Where you're going, that you won't have them, and now you have those things. Now you should be doing that, right? And that's Kohelet. Behind, what does he mean to teach us? Right, that which a person does not do at the time when his creator, when he has certain strengths that the creator gave him. God gave you certain skills and talents, and he put you in situations where you can accomplish, where you can achieve. And what is that ultimately? It's hu hakoach habechiri, is the ability to choose, right? What does Shlomo tell you? What does Solomon tell us in Kohelet? You have the skills, you have the ability, you have the knowledge, you have the wealth, you have the whatever it is that's needed in this moment. But ultimately, you have the choice to use it or not to use it, right? So it really boils down to the koach habechiri, is your personal choice. Will I do that, or will I just turn and walk away, and then I'll never know what I could have achieved if I did what I was supposed to? And that's the koach habechiri, the ability to make that choice. That we have our entire lives, as long as we're alive, we always have the ability to choose. Shehu bahem bechiri u'metzuva lasos, right? That is during your entire life, you have a free choice, and you're commanded to use that free choice to do the proper acts, to do the proper things. Those things you will no longer be able to do when you're in the grave. Then you will no longer have the ability to do it. If in your lifetime you didn't do all of these good actions, there will be a time when you'll no longer be able to do it. Whatever the world could have been, had we done these things, right, the world will not be, because you, with your special talent, whatever it was that you could have contributed, you didn't. It's gone. Let's try to imagine imagine this group of people that he's in the middle of discussing now, those that decide they want to be mediocre. Where would humanity be or where would the world be if all of those people didn't decide to be mediocre and decided to live lives with all of the abilities and skills? I would imagine, I mean, who knows? We don't know. Things could be so much better. Who knows? I mean, we don't know. I mean, we see what we have achieved, which is pretty incredible. But what could we have achieved if 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 every single human being lived to his or her full potential? It could be incredible. I mean, it could be, but it's gone. They're gone. They're done. They're in the grave. It's over, right? So, umishlo chishev cheshbon masav, a person that hasn't thought and put thought or calculations into his actions, lo yelos man lachashvoaz, right? So not you'll be dead. You won't have the strength to do it. You won't have the strength to think anymore. Whatever knowledge you've gained, whatever skill you've gained, it's gone. Umishalo hischakem bolam if you didn't gather any skills, lo hischakem hakever. No one's going to teach you in the grave how to do, whatever skill it is. That's what he meant when he said those four things, but they don't exist b'sheol in the grave. Where you're heading. So that's the end of the second group. This is really a good stopping point. The third group is the general public, right? So he gave us two motivations, right? There's the motivation for just doing the right thing because it's right, which is the highest level. And those people, I don't need to explain to them. They want to do it because it's right. And then there's the motivation of doing it for honor, right? Or I know, to avoid shame. So that's a lesser level. But remember, these people in the second group still understand that they should be doing the things that are right versus the things that are wrong. They still understand that true shame and true honor comes from doing or not doing things that are meaningful, right? And don't fool yourself into thinking that shame and honor don't matter to you, and therefore I don't have to do the effort. So that's the second group. I'll just get just a little spoiler. The third group are the people that don't have any understanding, right? Or maybe they do, but they're not living that way, of what's important or what's not. But they just want to have the best, that they want to win the game. They want to have the best that they can in terms of pleasure and they want to stay away from punishment. They don't want to suffer. And they see that because God rewards good and he punishes evil, therefore I should live a good life because that's my best chance at getting good and avoiding pain, right? So that's a third motivation to do good actions, right? Is to stay away from getting punished. But he's going to say it in a lot more detail, of course. But I just wanted I wanted to at least mention what the third one is going to be, just so they understand the three categories, right? And so remember, just before I end, he's teaching us now how to acquire zihirut, how to acquire vigilance or watchfulness. And watchfulness means watching our lives, taking concern over each thing that we do and making sure we do it right, and we do the right thing and making sure we don't do the wrong thing, right? So number one, he said, the best is to achieve it. The first thing, before I go into the levels, number one, learn, study, right? You have to know, right? That took one sentence, but it was the klal, it was the general rule. You cannot become good if you don't know the situation you're getting into. You have to study, you have to learn, so you know what the dangers are and what you can achieve, what you should achieve, what you can't, what so on. That's number one. And that hopefully we're doing now. And then he divided us into three groups. The motivation for doing the truth because it's true, doing the right thing because it's right, and then also doing it because we want honor and so on. So I'll stop there. We have a couple minutes before the hour ends to have questions or comments or discussion. Go ahead.
So I have a couple thoughts. Okay, so we're talking about levels, and it seems a bit subjective. How do you determine what is the absolute top tier, like relative to what? To God's perspective or to whose perspective? Because I think some people who are in the mediocre category might think in their own world based off of their life experience and their neighbors, their family, their upbringing, their neighborhood that they grew up in, that they've come a long way, and like they're now they feel that they've really, and they have they've accomplished a lot, that
Mhm.
maybe they're still not quite to the level of like the top people. So that's one question that I had.
Yeah.
My other thought was, how would you go about like motivating the mediocre people to want to go into that level? Because it's kind of like a secular analogy, but like, let's just say in a classroom, you've got your A students, you know, the people who just inherently want to do a good job. They want to get an A, they want to ace the test. But then as we know, most kids are average. So they're B, C, you know, maybe even some D's in there, but they're passing and they're not like failing. They're just average. And the way that a lot of them kind of see it, I think, is like, well, why am I going to push myself? Kind of like what he already said.
Yeah.
You know, why am I going to push myself? Why am I going to stay up late, lose sleep, be stressed? That kind of stinks. Well, I'm still going to graduate. I'm still going to get my degree. So, like, how would you convince that person, you know, that actually it is in your best interest, and actually, you know, I know you don't see it now, but 50 years from now or 25 years from now or whatever, you're going to be really thankful that you made these decisions. Like, how do you do that?
Yeah, those are both incredibly. I really like listening to those questions. I don't want to answer them as if there's like a solid, you know. But those are really well stated. I'll just say that I think that the answer to the first question, which is, you know, how do you measure who's on top and who's on bottom, like on what scale, you know. I think the scale is changes based on the atmosphere and environment and the person involved, right? And so it really depends on the person's real potential, you know. And the real true scale is if you reach your potential or not, you know. And that's like he kept on saying that the most of the scales that we see in front of our eyes are false. They're not real. They're you can say something. Go ahead.
Oh, he actually addresses that in
Derek Hashem?
yeah.
So tell us.
I would have to flip through a little bit
Okay.
on the actual passage, but he does actually address the folks actually obeying the commandments and performing mitzvah up to their abilities, and the fact that God does recognize like what we're actually capable of doing.
Mm-hmm. So there you have a good. So that would be how I would address that. I'm glad. Thank you for bringing that in. And wait, what was the second one again? The second question.
How would you motivate someone?
That's a really so he's trying to motivate those people by telling them you're fooling yourself, right? Mm. Whether or not his method will actually work, that I don't know. Like, I don't know if he went and did a psychological study and said, if I tell everyone in college to read this paragraph, then all of a sudden everyone's going to get A's. Like, I don't know if it works or not. But he certainly, his attempt is to say, first of all, remember, this is all in the background. These are all subcategories of the bottom line first sentence, which is learn, right? Study, right? So don't tell me that you really are okay with being mediocre if you really understood. And what is it that you needed to study? The true importance of the task, right? And the true consequences of success versus failure, right? So what he's saying is, if he can tell people, you know, look at this for real, look at the real situation, then they should be motivated to rise above it. I don't know if that's true or not. That's what he thinks, right? And that's why he wrote the book, because he's telling you, read the book and study, and then you will rise above. Whether or not people actually change by learning, it's some people do, and some people stay mediocre. Why?
Some people are comfortable there. You know, I don't understand that, but yeah, some people are most comfortable there.
Yeah, they just rather be there.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
well, I mean, this is also like a very work-related secular example, but I kind of completely understand. Actually, for me, it's not hard, because there are some jobs, like you guys have all probably in your career lives like experienced this. When you get promoted, it's never like, oh yay, I just got more money, and like there's no strings attached. It's like, oh yeah, I got more money, but now I have all these other responsibilities. And you know, I've talked to people before because they've like refused being a supervisor, refused being a manager, because they're like, I don't want that stress. I don't want to deal with managing people. And I totally get it, because when you do manage people and you do manage these situations, you're like, yeah, there are a lot of days where I don't really want to do it either, but somebody has to do it, right? Yeah. So I feel like there's like an element in there of like personal characteristic, or like personal personality.
There's also the element of
this all really it calls into question the entire enterprise of the Muslim movement, right? Because the Muslim movement is based on the idea that if you study this and think about this, you will actually become better, right? The point of the Muslim movement is to take this book, read it, and then become better, right? Mesilat Yesharim emphasized tonight, learn, and then you will act better. That is a premise which may or may not be true, right? You may look at it and look at that, in your example, the supervisor role, and say, I'm not interested, but there may be underlying factors there, but yeah. So I don't know, like, but it's and also like the supervisor role, like sometimes, if it's just a busy job and it's a lot of stuff, but you're not really changing the world or anything. But just imagine if it's a project that can really make a difference, and you decide it's all these headaches, so I'm not going to do it. And then whatever it was, depending on the job, right, that difference that you could have actually made doesn't happen and never happens, right?
And I actually get to see that every day in the hospital, just the little things where, like, no, you really could have just taken the time to, like, pick something up or showed somebody the way to the next appointment they're going to, and just actually made a real difference in their day.
Yep.
Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, you had the opportunity to do it, and now it doesn't happen, and all the repercussions
it just
forever.
compounds itself.
Yep.
Like all these little things just add up.
And in the Sheol, right? The Sheol is the depth of the grave. You can't go back. You can't make it happen anymore.
It also, we have to take into
The
consideration.
way it's presented to me is that you don't change unless you kind of do introspection, and you ask yourself, like, you work on a trait, and then you, again, missing the mark, you see where you missed the mark and say, okay, I'm going to concentrate on this tomorrow.
Right.
Not, I'm going to pick up the pencil for somebody. I'm going to not snap at my partner. I'm going to not put my dog in a kennel. Just kidding.
So that's on the dog there. Mine eats remote controls.
Yeah, I mean, yes, that is the Muslim way. But the idea is thinking about it will then translate into better behavior.
I don't, yeah, but I also think that from a psychological standpoint, you got to kind of acknowledge your
limitations on certain days, because it varies from day to day sometimes.
Well, or just kind of your limitations in general, and like there's always growth potential, no matter who you are and what a level of life you're at.
I think it's like the choice that some people make to go to therapy or not. There are people we could all.
This is who I am.
Yeah, like we could all benefit from it, but of course some people aren't going to go, and maybe they don't need to as much as somebody else.
All right, well, we can continue the conversation, but I'm going to end the recording.
Okay.
So next week, not the next time. It's, I guess, 2 weeks from today. So what is that? That's July
15th.
So 15th. We'll get together again, same time, and we'll start from the third category of people in this group. So thank you for joining, and for those that are watching, thank you for joining, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, so.